Ladies and gentlemen, today, my speech on the title Silent Also is a Voice. It is very deeply standable topic for all people. I say that sometimes silent more powerful from words, because silence speaks when words fail. There are moments in life when words fall short. When pain runs so deep, no sentence can capture it. When joy overflows, yet no language feels worthy enough to express it. In those moments, silence steps in. We live in a world that often glorifies noise. We equate volume with value and speech with strength. But what if I told you that some of the most powerful conversations happen in complete silence? Think about a mother holding her newborn child. No words, just connection. Think about standing at the edge of a mountain, breathless, not speaking, yet feeling everything. Think about a friend sitting beside you during your worst days, saying nothing, but being everything. Silence speaks when our voices tremble, when our hearts are broken, when our minds are overwhelmed. It holds space for emotions too raw for speech. It teaches us to listen, not just to others, but to ourselves, to the whispers of our soul, to the lessons beneath the noise. In silence, we don't lose our voice, we find our truth. So today, let us embrace the quiet. Let us no longer fear the pauses. Because sometimes, when words fail, silence becomes our greatest teacher. Keynote 1. Silence speaks when words fail. Have you ever walked into a room where no one is speaking, yet you can feel the heaviness in the air? Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and seen an entire story unfolding without a single word being spoken? This, my friend, is the unspoken power of silence. Because silence is not the absence of a voice. Silence is a voice, a powerful one that often speaks when words are no longer enough. Growing up, we are taught the value of speaking, expressing, asserting, and yes, communication is a gift, but we're rarely taught the equal power of silence. When people fall silent in moments of grief, in moments of love, in moments of pain, we often mistake it for weakness or emotional numbness. But that's not true. Silence is a deeply emotional language, one that only those with emotional awareness can understand. Let me share something personal. During some of the darkest times in my life, when I was confined to a wheelchair after that devastating car accident, I didn't have the strength to speak. But in my silence, there was a storm inside. There were tears, there were dreams, there were hopes breaking and hopes building again. And that silence, it said more than any sentence could. When words fail, silence becomes the voice of the soul. In our classrooms, in our families, in our communities, we often overlook those who are silent. The quiet child in the back of the room, the co-worker who avoids social settings, the friend who hasn't called in a while. We tend to think they're fine. If they needed help, they would speak up. But not everyone knows how to put their emotions into words. Some carry their entire world inside them, locked away behind a closed mouth and a soft smile. This is why we must learn to tune our ears, not just to sound, but to silence. Because when someone is silent, they might be screaming inside, they might be crying for help, or simply holding back a flood of emotion because they don't want to burden others. They may be healing, they may be grieving, they may be trying to figure out how to turn pain into purpose. In fact, some of the most profound forms of communication are nonverbal. A long pause before answering, a look that lingers, a tear that escapes unannounced, a sigh. These are not empty moments, they are loaded with meaning. And it is our responsibility to learn this language, to understand that silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes, it is full of truth that words can't carry. Educators, parents, leaders, please hear this. The next time someone is silent in your presence, don't rush to fill the space with advice or instruction. Just sit with them. Sometimes, the most powerful act of love is just to be there, to witness the silence without trying to fix it. Because when we hold space for someone's silence, we are telling them, I see you. Even when you can't speak, I hear you. So yes, silence is a voice of pain, a voice of healing, a voice of resilience, and sometimes the only voice a person has. Let us begin to honor silence as we do speech. Let us become people who do not fear silence, but who respect it, who learn from it, and who recognize it as the language of the soul. Because when words fail, silence does not. Keynote 2. Listening beyond words. One of the most powerful lessons life has ever taught me is this: not all voices are loud, and not all communication comes through words. In fact, some of the deepest cries for help, the most sincere expressions of love, and the most profound insights are shared in complete silence. The world is often too noisy, filled with opinions, judgments, and distractions. But if we train our hearts and our minds to listen beyond words, we begin to hear a language far more powerful than speech. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and realized they're saying something, even though their lips remain still? That's not your imagination. That's the art of listening beyond words. In classrooms, we focus so much on teaching how to speak well, public speaking, debating, expressing thoughts, but how often do we teach the art of listening, especially when nothing is being said? Let me share something with you. I've met many people who smiled wide, who laughed loud, and who looked like they had it all together. But when I looked a little deeper, when I listened a little deeper, I saw sorrow tucked quietly behind that smile, pain hiding behind the laughter, fear wrapped in silence. And that's when I realized, so many people are silently screaming for someone to understand them. Listening beyond words means being fully present. It means paying attention to the tiny tremble in someone's voice, the hesitation before they speak, the way they look away when a certain topic is mentioned. It's noticing the long pause in a conversation, or the fake smile they force just to make it through the day. It's realizing that when someone says, "I'm fine," too quickly, they might not be. In our relationships, whether as teachers, parents, friends, or leaders, we must recognize that sometimes people are not looking for advice or solutions, they're just looking to be heard. And often, the most broken voices don't speak, they hope you will hear them anyway. There was a young girl in a school I visited once. She never raised her hand in class, never spoke unless she had to, and always kept her head down. Many labeled her as disengaged or shy, but when I sat with her after a session, I noticed the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her little brother. I saw her fingers tremble when she mentioned her father's absence. Her voice was quiet, yes, but her silence had stories, raw, real stories, that no one had taken the time to hear. In that moment, I didn't need to talk, I didn't need to fix her pain, I just needed to sit, to be there, to acknowledge the weight she was carrying in silence. And believe me, that act of listening, without interrupting, without rushing, it changed her life. But more than that, it changed mine. Let me ask you something. Who in your life is silent right now? Is it your child, your spouse, your student, your colleague? Have you taken the time to sit with their silence, not to fill it with your words, but to honor it with your presence? Because silence, my friend, is not empty. It's full of meaning. And when we choose to really listen, to truly hear what is not said, we offer the kind of understanding that builds trust, heals wounds, and nurtures hearts. Listening beyond words requires humility. It requires patience. It requires you to let go of your assumptions. You can't do it with your ears alone. You must engage your heart, because only the heart knows how to listen to silence. You see, in a world that moves too fast, that talks too much, and that listens too little, your ability to listen silently becomes your superpower. It makes you a safe space for others. It gives people the courage to be vulnerable. And that is the beginning of real connection. So today, I challenge you to slow down, to stop filling every quiet moment with noise, to start listening, not just to what people say, but also to what they don't say. Look around you. There are silent voices waiting to be heard. All they need is for someone like you to listen, not with judgment, not with answers, but with love. Because sometimes, listening beyond words is the kindest thing you'll ever do. 3. The power of presence over sound. There are moments in life when words simply fall short. No matter how carefully chosen or beautifully spoken, they cannot always reach the depths of a hurting heart or calm the chaos in someone's mind. In such moments, it is not the eloquence of our speech that matters. It is our presence. Silent, steady, sincere presence. I have learned, both through experience and observation, that sometimes the loudest expression of love, support, or empathy comes through silence. Just being there speaks volumes. You don't have to say a thing. You don't have to offer advice. You don't have to fix the situation. You just have to show up and stay. Let me take you back to one of the most painful seasons of my life. When I was confined to a hospital bed, after the accident that changed my life forever, people would come and visit me. Many brought flowers, some brought cards, and almost everyone brought words, well-meaning, beautiful words. Everything happens for a reason. You're so strong, you'll be okay. Don't worry, things will get better. I appreciated the kindness, but at times, those words felt like echoes in a hollow room. Because inside, I was broken, I was scared, and I didn't know how to be okay again. But then, there were those few precious people who came and sat beside me. They didn't ask me to speak, they didn't try to change my mood, they didn't pretend to understand what I was going through. They just sat, they held my hand, they were simply present, and believe me, their silence comforted me in a way no words could. That kind of presence was a balm to my wounds. Presence is a powerful voice. It says, I am here, and I am not going anywhere. It says, you are not alone. In a world where everyone is trying to speak louder, shout harder, and push their voice forward, presence offers peace. In silence, presence allows space. Space for grief, space for reflection, space for emotions to breathe. As an educator, as a mother, as a motivational speaker, I've seen this principle at work across all walks of life. In classrooms, for instance, a teacher may not always know the battles a student is facing at home. Sometimes, a student comes in with silence, not because they are defiant or uninterested, but because they are carrying a weight too heavy for words. In those moments, the teacher's gentle eye contact, an encouraging nod, or just the act of noticing the child can mean everything. That unspoken gesture becomes a bridge between two hearts. It says, I see you, I value you. In parenting too, we often assume we must have all the answers, that we must lecture or give advice. But many times, your child doesn't need a lecture. They need your lap. They need your time. They need you to sit with them through their confusion, their heartbreaks, and their silent questions. No words, just your presence. There is a story I love to recall. A man once said his best friend helped him through the hardest season of his life. When asked what that friend did, he replied, he didn't do anything. He was just there. That is the power of silent presence. It doesn't scream to be noticed, but it is always felt. Let's talk about leadership for a moment. We often think that leaders must constantly speak, command, and direct. But the greatest leaders are those who also know how to be present. They know when to pause, when to listen, and when to let others speak. Their silence gives others the confidence to rise. Their presence creates safety, not fear. So today, I invite you to reconsider what it means to be a voice. You don't always have to speak to be heard. You don't always have to speak to make a difference. Sometimes, the most profound difference you can make is to show up and say nothing, and just be. Remember, your presence can hold more weight than your voice. Let it be calm, let it be reassuring, let it be real. Because when the noise of the world dies down, when all the motivational speeches are over, and when the advice has run dry, what we all long for most is someone who stays. So choose to be that someone, because silent also is a voice. Silent strength is not weakness. We live in a world that often associates strength with loudness, with shouting your opinion, with standing tall, arms raised, voices booming. But what if I told you that there is another kind of strength? A quieter one that doesn't scream, one that doesn't demand attention, yet it carries the power to move mountains. It is called silent strength, and it is not weakness. I want to take you to a hospital room. A young woman lies on a bed. Her back is broken, her body paralyzed, her dreams shattered. At least that's what the world sees. But in that very moment of silence, when the machines beep and the tears fall quietly, something extraordinary happens. She doesn't speak, she doesn't complain, she doesn't protest. But inside her, a decision is being made. I will not give up, not now, not ever. That young woman was me. You see, there are times in life when silence is not a sign of defeat, but of determination. Silent strength is the ability to absorb the storm without falling apart. It's the calm in the chaos. It's the person who holds your hand when words don't help. It's the mother who cries in the bathroom, but walks out with a smile for her children. It's the teacher who shows up every day, underpaid and overlooked, yet continues to shape the minds of tomorrow. It's you and me when we choose to stay grounded in the middle of a storm, not because we are too afraid to fight, but because we are too wise to waste our energy on noise. Education systems often teach us to speak up, and yes, that is important, but how often are we taught to be still? To embrace the silence not as absence, but as presence. In the noise of the world, we forget that sometimes the most powerful battles are won without a single word. Now let's get practical. In our classrooms, offices and families, we must learn to value the silent contributors. The quiet student who never raises their hand, but always submits thoughtful work. The colleague who doesn't participate in office politics, but gets the job done with excellence. The sibling who listens more than they speak, but understands you more than anyone else. These are the people who show us that loud is not always right, and quiet is not always weak. From a psychological perspective, silent strength is often linked to emotional intelligence. It requires self-control, maturity, and the ability to delay reaction for the sake of reflection. When someone provokes you, it is easy to shout back. It is easy to argue. But do you know what's hard? What takes real courage? Walking away, choosing peace, remaining silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know saying it would not serve the greater good. And isn't that what true strength is? Doing what is difficult when nobody is watching. Choosing dignity over drama. Grace over gossip. Patience over pride. In my own journey, people assumed I was weak because I didn't retaliate. They thought I was broken because I didn't defend myself with words. But I was healing in silence. Rebuilding from the inside out. Sometimes the loudest scream is the one that no one hears, except your own soul, and that is enough. So I want to say this to you. If you are someone who carries silent strength, never let the world make you feel invisible. You are not weak because you're quiet. You are wise because you choose your words carefully. You are brave because you fight your battles in private. You are powerful because you let your actions speak louder than your voice. To the students out there, don't feel pressured to be loud to be seen. Let your work speak. Let your integrity speak. To the teachers and mentors, teach not only the power of words, but also the power of pauses. Teach your students the strength that comes from within. To the leaders, recognize the silent pillars of your organization. They may not seek the spotlight, but they are the ones holding up the stage. And to you, my friend, wherever you are in life, if you are silently enduring, silently growing, silently hoping, you are stronger than you think. Remember, silent also is a voice, and often it is the voice that heals, inspires and leads without ever raising a sound. 5. Silence in adversity builds resilience in the voice and emotional depth of Muniba Mazari. Let me begin by telling you something that many people may not have told you. Your silence in times of adversity is not emptiness, it is not failure, it is not defeat. It is a deep sacred space where resilience is born. We live in a world that teaches us to speak up, to shout louder, to fight with words, and yes, there is a time for that. But have you ever noticed how, in your darkest moments, when life knocks you down and your voice begins to tremble, you fall into silence? Not because you have nothing to say, but because what you're going through goes beyond words. There is a silence that comes from pain, but that silence is not a void, it is a womb of strength. It is in that silence that you begin to confront your fears. It is in that quiet space that you begin to realize that your survival is no longer dependent on what you say, but on what you believe. Let me take you back to a hospital bed in a trauma center in Pakistan. A 21-year-old girl wakes up after a life-altering car crash. Her body is broken, her dreams feel shattered, her future seems uncertain. That girl was me. In those early days, I had no words, I had no voice. I couldn't find the strength to ask, why me? My silence was heavy, but you see, something miraculous began to happen in that very silence. That space of stillness became my teacher. It taught me things I never could have learned in a classroom, or from a book, or even from a motivational speaker. In silence I started to hear my own heart. In silence I began to understand what real strength meant. You see, we often misunderstand resilience.
We think it looks like shouting, "I can do it," every morning, but resilience is often quiet. It is the person who shows up to class with a broken heart, but still tries to learn. It is the mother who quietly prays for her children, with tears no one sees. It is the student who fails, but refuses to give up. It is you when you keep going, even when your voice is shaking, or when you have no voice at all. Adversity doesn't always announce itself with loud alarms. It often tiptoes into our lives quietly. And the fight it brings us into is often fought in silence, within ourselves, but don't mistake that silence as weakness. Think of the lotus flower. It blooms beautifully from the mud, quietly, silently. Or think of the strongest trees. They grow their deepest roots underground, in complete silence. When we're silent in our struggle, we're actually building roots. Deep roots, roots of endurance, roots of wisdom, roots of compassion. You might not see it on the surface, but below a powerful transformation is happening, and when you rise, you will rise stronger than ever before. Resilience, my friends, is not loud, it's not always public, it's not always shared in social media posts or viral videos. Resilience is in the unseen moments. The tears you wipe away when no one is watching. The breath you take when you want to scream, but choose to breathe instead. The day you decide to try again, even when your heart is still healing. Education often teaches us how to succeed, but life teaches us how to survive. And in surviving, we become students of silence. Every adversity is an unspoken exam, and every time you get through it, without applause, without acknowledgement, without even words, you pass, you grow, you rise. So the next time you find yourself in a moment of painful silence, don't run from it. Don't be ashamed of it. Honor it, respect it, sit with it. Because in that silence something is awakening, in that silence something is growing, and that something, my friend, is called resilience. Let your silence shake you, not break you. Let it teach you, not trap you. Let it become the strength that no one sees, but everyone will feel when you finally stand up and say, not with noise, but with presence, "I survived, I endured, and I am still here." There are voices around us that do not speak the way we expect. They do not rise in volume, they do not command attention through eloquence, and they do not make headlines. But these voices are no less powerful. In fact, they might just be more profound. Today I want to speak about the forgotten ones, the silent voices, and I want to challenge all of us to make space for them. You see, silence does not always mean absence. Just because someone is not speaking, does not mean they have nothing to say. Often it means they have not been given the space to be heard. I was once that silent voice. After my accident, I found myself surrounded by a noise I couldn't connect with, petty opinions, instructions, but not once did anyone ask me how I felt. I couldn't shout. I didn't have the strength. So I stayed silent, and in that silence I wasn't voiceless. I was unheard. That was my turning point. I learned something powerful. Being silent is not the same as being weak. It is not the same as being invisible. It is not the same as being irrelevant. In schools and homes, in workplaces, in society, we often mistake loudness for leadership and quietness for insignificance. We celebrate those who can speak confidently in a room, but we rarely notice the student who quietly excels, the colleague who works diligently without seeking applause, or the family member who silently carries emotional burdens without complaining. But let me ask you this. What about the ones who never speak up? What about the child in the classroom who struggles to read aloud but is a creative genius when alone with a pencil? What about the woman who endures emotional pain silently every night and still shows up with a smile every morning? What about the young man who never joins debates but has ideas that could change the world if only someone would ask him to share? The truth is, we often fail to recognize silent voices because we're too busy amplifying the loud ones. But greatness doesn't always shout. Courage doesn't always roar. Some of the strongest hearts beat quietly. If we are to grow as a community, if we are to educate not just minds but also hearts, we must teach ourselves and others to listen differently, to observe, to include. We must build classrooms, workplaces, and societies that don't just allow space for silent voices, but actively invite them. And how do we do that? First, we must listen without interrupting. Silence after a question is not awkward, it's space. Give people time to find their words. Second, we must change our definition of participation. Not everyone is a public speaker. Let people write, draw, observe, and reflect. These are valid forms of expression too. Third, we must check our biases. Stop assuming silence is indifference. Stop assuming quiet people have nothing to offer. Sometimes the quietest person in the room has the loudest thoughts. And finally, we must be the voice for others until they find theirs. This does not mean speaking for them. It means standing with them. It means being an amplifier, not a replacement. You know, I often think about the artists, the writers, the dreamers, the deep thinkers, and the wounded warriors among us. So many of them are hidden behind silence. All they need is someone who believes in them. Someone who says, I see you, I believe you matter, even if you don't say a word. Let us be that someone. Because when we learn to listen to the silent voices, we discover stories that change our perspective. We uncover strength we never knew existed. We build bridges where there were once walls. In the end, remember this, the loudest voice isn't always the most truthful, and the quietest presence isn't always the weakest. True education is not about who speaks the most, it's about who we make room for. So let's make room, let's listen better. Let's open doors for voices that were never meant to be silenced in the first place, because silent also is a voice.